God, I got a lot of messages that have come in over that show. Okay, after show.
Hey, all right. Hey, I wanted to ask you. We've got the Olympics that are coming up, and
I didn't even know it.
the really wow.
I don't watch TV, dude. I don't watch broadcast TV.
Yeah, I don't really watch them that much either, to be honest with you. But this has been in the news quite a bit because the Olympics are in China. And it's the Winter Olympics. Of course, China, the last time we saw the Olympics there, I think it was the Summer Olympics in Beijing. China has a lot to show the world, and this is why they want to have the Olympics there. But a lot of we as the United States have curtailed any type of diplomatic representation in China as a form of protest. And a lot of people.
You're saying we're not participating in the Olympics?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we're not going to have our government officials there whatsoever, which is a normal part of the Olympics, as a form of protest on what's happening within China, especially as we take a look at the Uyghur population and what's happened there with the concentration camps and many, many other human rights violations that are happening in China. I guess this might be something you haven't thought of, but many people are calling for a complete boycott of the Olympics, and wanted to just get your thoughts around that and what you think about it.
Well, since I haven't even known that the Olympics were coming up, that's how disconnected I am. I don't know. You just brought this up, so
it's one of those things.
It sounds like a weak protest compared to the fact that we should be trying to get every industry we can out of China. I just found out this week where the world is 68% dependent on China for our grain. And corn. And corn, man, we use corn for everything.
Yep.
We need to get it. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the statistics were coming out that something 90+% of our pharmaceuticals are made in China.
That's exactly right.
We have got to divorce ourselves from them. So protesting in the Olympics, who cares? That doesn't mean anything. I really don't care about that in the slightest. These things that we just brought up, yeah, I care about that.
We're seeing in China some pretty severe things that have happened over the last few weeks, as a matter of fact, with lockdowns that are going on and people being sealed up in their houses. It's basically starving. And I thought about this too. I remember back in 1984, the United States boycotted the Olympics in the USSR because of the invasion of Afghanistan. It's kind of funny to think about, since we did the same thing years later and stayed there for 20 years.
Yeah.
But we boycotted the Olympics. I was a senior in high school at the time and running track. And I remember that all of these people, a lot of people I was watching, it was the Summer Olympics. A lot of the people that I was paying attention to, that I saw as heroes on the track, they had their Olympic hopes taken away from them at the last minute. And I thought, gosh, what a tragedy that is, because these people worked all of their lives in order to make it to the Olympics. And then suddenly they got the rug torn out from underneath of them. And I didn't see that whole thing as a reason for taking away their Olympic dreams. However,
because they weren't thought about in the grand scheme of things.
Right. And to your point, it really didn't make a difference. I mean, it didn't change anything diplomatically with what was going on in Afghanistan. However, when I take a look at this particular situation, I agree with you. I don't think that boycotting the Olympics in China are going to move the needle in any direction whatsoever. But I do think that there could be some security concerns around this whole thing happening in China. We've heard of people just disappearing over there. We see that we are no friend of that nation whatsoever, and that could be a reason for pulling out of the Olympics. I don't think that's going to happen. It looks like we're fully committed at this point, and we'll just have to see what would happen. However, we have a history in the Olympics of things going wrong. We had an incident where some Jewish Olympians were actually murdered at one of the Olympics back in the 70s that were taken during political purposes. They were blown up, actually. And we've also seen here in the United States, in Atlanta, if you'll recall, where that bomb blew up, and that was
Boston Marathon?
The domestic terrorism that happened. No, this happened in Atlanta during the 1990 Olympics, I believe it was. I don't know if you remember that. There's a whole movie all around that. Oh yeah, the whole thing was in the what do they call it? The Olympic Village. During a very populated time. It was at night, and a bomb was set off full of nails and different pieces of metal. It killed several people down there. It was a terrible thing. So these things happen during the Olympics, and it is something to take a look at. And God bless everybody that's going to be there. It starts at the beginning of February, so we're just a couple of weeks away.
Yeah, from a politician's point of view, I see how you could be enamored with the idea of boycotting, because boy, everybody on a national stage is looking at that. It has no real meaning, but symbolically it looks like we're doing something, because it'd be really a lot harder trying to get our industry and proprietary technology back from overseas over China, because they're so infiltrated in us. That's a tall order.
Well, what you see here is that China stands to make a boatload of money regarding the Olympics on advertising and business and everyone traveling there. So in a sense, we're supporting what they're doing by being a part of the Olympics. If you take a look at the 1936 Olympics that happened in Nazi Germany, some things they talked about boycotting those Olympics as well. It didn't happen, but what did happen prior to the Olympics happening in Berlin was that all of the Jews and the Gypsies were moved out of the city and put into camps so that they would not be a part of the record of this, the international record of what was going on in Germany. Germany at that time was seen as a rising star, that Hitler had done these miraculous things with the economy, because only a few years before that, they were needing wheelbarrows full of money just to buy bread. Shortly before the Depression. Now, 36 was in the Great Depression, and here Germany financially was doing well while the rest of the world was doing terribly. And many people thought that this form of dictatorship was the way to go. By being a part of the Olympics, many people thought that, hey, you're actually supporting what Hitler is doing. I kind of look back at it and say, wow, if that had never happened, we never would have known the name of Jesse Owens and several other athletes that made a mark on the 36 Olympics. I just read this book, Boys in the Boat, where the rowing team beat Nazi Germany, which was a huge feature at that time. We don't think of that as a big event today, but back then that was one of the biggest events. So you had the rowers and you had Jesse Owens winning in the Olympics, and here they were touting themselves as the master race. And this team and Jesse Owens, being a black man too, crushed that whole notion during the 36 Olympics. So if they would have boycotted the Olympics, those things would have never happened.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. So we'll see what happens with the Beijing. I think it's in Beijing Olympics that are coming up here. It's funny that the CCP, they see themselves as the master race, and many of the things that Hitler stood for, they stand for as well. Xi Jinping stands for. They talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and we'll have to see how that works out. I'm hoping something like the Jesse Owens things happens all over again.
That's a cool spin on it. I mean, it's a great way to find some interest in it rather than, as always, just supposed to be divisive about it. I don't know about Master Race, but boy, they sure got they got their finger on the pulse of a government structure that is arguably able to take over this world.
Well, it's interesting how they've been able to create influence across the world. They've got a program called the Belt and Road Initiative, which comes in the form of aid to particular nations. And Cuba actually just signed up for the Belt and Road Initiative. So what happens is China comes in, they build all types of infrastructure, they pump all kinds of money into the country, they build factories, and they put people to work. And so this is very attractive to each of these countries. But, it's interesting how this whole thing works, because what they do with the infrastructure is they use it to surveil the population and basically enslave the population to whatever is in the best interest of China, not necessarily that nation. So they've done this all across the world. And to your point earlier, the whole corn thing, and 60% of the corn is coming from China. This is why this type of thing is happening, is because they've used their influence in order to capture these types of countries. And they are able to inflict their form of government into these types of countries as well. We see this type of thing happening right now, right here in the United States as well.
By the way, that's a point they made about the corn, is that they are already starting to withhold the corn to intentionally weaken our economies.
That's exactly right. And as I think we've talked about this on the show as well, is that there is a major push happening by the Chinese Communist Party to purchase farmland here in this country. Right. And I just read a report, and this is exponentially skyrocketed the rate of purchase that's happened here in the United States. But what I'm also finding out is that what we see on the record is only a piece of maybe just the tip of the iceberg, because what they're also able to do is purchase these lands through people that already live here, so that it doesn't look like they're actually purchasing the land. So it's probably much worse than what we're seeing. Now they control our agriculture and they control our food. And that is
that's everything.
That is really everything. That is everything. So very shrewd in what they're doing. And I would just say, to your point earlier, once again, Barry, is that this country needs to wake up and understand what's actually happening and get serious about trading with China right now. We need to build our own infrastructure. We can't be relying on China, for example, as you mentioned, for pharmaceuticals. That needs to be something done in-house, because that pipeline can be shut off instantly.
But we have so many problems. Pfizer is like the cartel. I mean, it is so freaking corrupt. And like I said, the FDA's main focus was to hold pharmaceutical, Food and Drug Administration, to hold these industries accountable for what they're producing. And they're not. They're letting pharmaceutical industries do their own testing without double checking it. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
You're right, Barry. We did a great session on the Constitution and went through line by line on many of the things. And as you take a look at the FDA or the CDC or many of these other bureaucracies out there, really it flies in the face of what the Constitution says, because these are government oversight bureaucracies that have the power of legislation behind them. And the very beginning of the Constitution, Article 1, is the legislative branch, says that the legislative branch cannot designate that power to any other organization. And the reason is because they're completely accountable to the people. These bureaucracies are not, and therefore they're easily bought off because they're nameless, faceless people. And the very purpose that they're founded under can easily be corrupted. And we're seeing that today to exactly what you're talking about. And that's why it was so important not to designate and delegate these responsibilities to other entities. But it's already happened. The cat's out of the bag, and now we're suffering the consequences.
It's like the genie's out of the bottle.
It is.
How do you put it? It's putting toothpaste back in the tube, you know.
I don't know how you do
depressing. Just on a side, I don't have any notes on this, but I remember thinking about, man, I got to tell Merle about this stuff. I listened to like 3 Joe Rogan episodes almost this last week, which is a lot for me. I normally don't listen to that many, but for different reasons. They're totally different. Like, first of all, I started on an Oliver Stone one, and I listened to Oliver Stone's interview.
Well, I bet that was interesting.
A year or so ago it was. This one sucked. I made it a third of the way through. It was all about JFK. So he did his first JFK movie 30 years ago or something like that. Costner played the lead in it. Then he just came out with another, would you say biography, a documentary on the whole gig as well, again, just recently. And man, he is kind of crazy in that regard. Like, even when you watch his movies, like the last one, something in Hollywood.
Yeah, I don't know.
And they did the whole crazy take on the Manson family at the end, which nothing was rooted in truth whatsoever. Listening to him talk about the JFK thing, he clearly sees JFK himself as being this deity that could do no wrong, best man in the world, and all of the everybody was opposed to him, but he was a beaming, shining light. And it's like Oliver Stone is incredibly brilliant, and his knowledge of history is like unmatched, but he sees it from the perspective that he wants to see it from.
True.
Every aspect. And I started thinking about it like in simple terms. When I was a kid, I had like 3 main friends, and we were all very different. And we used to all go out and get in trouble together, you know, every day, for all those years as we were growing up. And if you would have read the same story from each different perspective, you would have a totally different grasp on the reality of who we were. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's all about perspective. Who was the good one? Who was the bad one? Who was the mischievous one? Who was this one? And so Oliver Stone just kind of leans into what he wants to see. And when you're so immersed and obsessed with it out of so many years, man, you have a lot of time to put different pieces into the puzzle as you want. So I was getting nothing out of it. So a third of the way through, I shut it off. And because I got so many other podcasts to listen to anyway. And then I came back and I listened to another one, second or third time I've heard Adam Curry on as a guest. And he's known as the original podcaster, the first. He coined the term podcast. He was a DJ or a VJ on MTV back in the day.
Okay.
Had the big hair, good looking guy, and smart guy, smart, maybe a little too smart for his own good. Conspiracy theorist all the way through and through, and can really make you think a whole lot about a lot of different issues. But he will go as far as to question the whole lunar landing thing. And then he kind of got backed into, what do you think about the flat earth thing? And he couldn't say that he didn't disbelieve that one either. It's like, this guy knows no boundaries. All right.
Wow.
So it was very interesting. I listened to the whole thing. I'll guarantee you, if you listen to it, you'll learn a lot. For sure. And it's kind of like, the point of that is, you need people that will take the stretch all the way to the finish line, because you're going to, I bet you 75% of what he said was smarter than what I know. and I learned about. But you got to take the other 25% and filter that out while you're at it. You know, I do anyway. If you want to believe, you know, and question what he does, that's your own. And I have to do that with everything. I listen to Crystal and Sagar, and I have to try to filter that. They go into a lot of left leaning stuff, to tell you the truth, that I sometimes like, I can't really follow you there. But 75% of it, if not more, I just learn a ton off of. Then the third one, which I just finished early this morning, was Rogan with Carrot Top, the comedian.
Carrot Top. I haven't seen that guy in a long time.
Yeah.
I think he's in Vegas now, isn't he?
He has been for like 28 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 28 years.
Wow.
Anyways, it was just, I normally, if I see something like that, I normally wouldn't listen to that. I go for the scientists and mind stretching stuff.
So what'd you think?
I freaking loved it. It was
really
just interesting and entertaining. That's all I'll say. I didn't know anything about Carrot Top at all, really. And really cool guy. And he and Rogan never met. They said that right at the beginning. My God, all the, you know, both been in comedy for 30 years. We never met. They hit it off great. No, it was just a very entertaining, light, but not too light episode. That was very enjoyable. So I recommend it just based on that. Nothing political, nothing earth shattering. No, but it was really enjoyable.
You know, what piques my interest is the last one, the one in the middle. What's the
Adam
original?
Curry?
Adam Curry. I do remember that name now from
very interesting
MTV, but I can't place the face on that. You said he was a conspiracy
Google
theorist.
Images. Very smart dude, man. Very smart.
He was talking about the lunar landing, and I remember that my brother-in-law was telling me, oh well, I've got this thing I want you to watch. It's called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And if you watch it, you're gonna question whether or not they ever landed on the moon. And I was mad. Like, do not. He came over to my house actually with the DVD. And I'm like, I do not want to watch that, because I was gonna be an astronaut. I was drinking Tang every day.
You're too big.
Yeah, no, I didn't think about that back then. I was a kid, you know.
Yeah, drinking Tang every day. But you qualify. Yeah,
yeah, right. Anyway, I would look at the moon and just imagine how cool it would be to just go up there and be on the moon with those astronauts, and just it was such a great thing. And also ever since then, it's been a source of pride for me that we went up there, you know. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
So he would not take no for an answer. I mean, he just put it in there and started playing it. And I got to tell you, disappointing. There was some very compelling evidence in there that caused me to question that whole thing. And today I would say that if somebody asked me, did we actually go up there? I don't know. I really don't know.
Now you have to do the other end of your due diligence, which I just don't have the patience for. I don't care. It's too silly to me. And that is, take all of those statements that made you question it and then follow those up. Do your own research.
And well, that's the whole thing.
And you'll find every one of those refuted, I'm sure.
Well, here's
and now you're down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. To see, that's the whole thing, is that here's what I've learned in life, is that when these powers tell you what to think, you just can't take those things on face value. You know,
totally agree. I run everything through my common sense filter.
You have to run it. That's very smart, because it's just like, okay,
because I don't
Republicans and Democrats, right? It's like, you can't believe everything the Democrats say. so you should believe everything the Republicans say. No, that's wrong.
No.
Because you're going to fall into the ditch on one side or the other.
Mhm.
And that's the whole thing. When you take a look at the whole space race that was happening, and we're going to be first to the moon. Why would our government be so interested in going to the moon? And then you start to realize that those rockets were the same rockets that contain can send nuclear warheads from one country to another, and maybe that's what it was. Then you add in propaganda to that whole thing. We got propaganda happening here, just like the USSR had propaganda happening. And then you just all bets are off, and then you got to say, I'm not sure.
No, you're right, and I'm less and less sure about everything with each passing day, because I learned so much more. Another thing that Adam Curry said about Elon Musk's SpaceX program is, he said it's so infiltrated with the government. It's just, we can't get anything done with NASA. That's totally a military plan that's going on behind the scenes.
Right. And it always has been. That's the whole thing. And that's what you got to wonder about is, okay, what's real? The whole Kennedy assassination is the same thing. I don't think we're ever going to find out what really happened there. The story that we're being told doesn't cut the logic test. It doesn't really make sense. And so there seems to be a lot of factors and a lot of powers that would have loved to have taken them out. But now when you really think about it, the fact that presidents were cruising around in those open vehicles like that, how easy would it be to take out those people like that? And then I started thinking about Hitler and how he would stand up and drive into a crowd with his Heil Hitler thing, and there he was right there, totally out in the open. Anybody could have taken that guy out. It never happened.
Yeah, it's until it happens. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, in the United States, we flaunted, I was going to say flaunt, then I past tensed it, flaunted our freedoms as much as we could because we're so proud of it. But like 9/11 took that all away from us.
It sure did.
Yeah. The JFK assassination even precluded that and took that freedom away from us. And so, one by one, those things get torn down. And it's too bad. Then you take a situation like we've had with the pandemic the last couple of years and see some states just try to seize that opportunity to take the rights away.
All over it.
No place is worse than Australia, where they've had this much of a problem. Yeah. And have really taken and run with that. But again, Adam Curry said that there's so much. I would encourage you. You would really like that podcast. You would. Cool. But he said, man, they were so ripe for that because that whole smart dude, man, really well read. He said, that it all started out as a penal colony, which I forgot about.
That's true. Yeah.
I forgot about that. So he's like, they're already ripe for that. You want to tell them to lock down. It's like second nature for them. And, so that's where he said that kind of came from. He elaborates.
I hadn't really thought about that either, but that's absolutely that's why they sound like they're British over there, is because that's what the British were using as a penal colony.
Crikey. Right.
Right. Wow. Interesting stuff right there.
Yeah.
Man.
I'm just saying to you particularly, you would really like that Adam Curry interview. And then the Carrot Top one was just fun. It was just entertaining.
I've never been a fan of Carrot Top. I never thought his stuff was funny.
Yeah, he's all about the props.
Yeah. And I guess I'm not into prop humor.
Yeah, and he said, through most of the thing, he's talking about how, he's just hated. And Rogan said the same thing, man. It's like just popular to hate on you for years and years. And he's like, yeah, but it's kind of like I stayed around long enough that I finally got invited to the party. It's kind of like, but he'd talk about other comedians and stuff that just totally disrespected him. And he's a nice guy, like super nice. So, is what it is. All I know is he carved out one hell of a career for himself. So,
it's kind of funny though that now we're talking about this, the whole prop humor thing. I'm thinking that that's a thing in the comedian world, is that prop humor guys don't get the respect in the comedian world. I remember there was a Seinfeld episode where he's doing a gig, and before him there's a prop humor guy, and that guy shows up in several episodes. They just don't give those guys the respect that they deserve for some reason. I don't know why.
No, I don't know either. It's like a purist kind of thing. They talked a little bit about that. They're talking about in one of the most prestigious comedy clubs for comedians, the Comedy Store, I believe that's in LA. And every comedian always talks about Mitzi, who used to run it. She has since passed, but she ran those guys, and it would be like the guitarist comedian. She would all of a sudden, right before he's ready to go on, no guitar tonight, and they'd freaking bomb. Because that's their whole sense of security. Their whole act was based on that.
Whoa.
But she was like this would pull this purist thing on them every now and then. And it's like Rogan said, he goes, Jesus, man. He goes, there's room for every kind of comedy out there. You know, it's kind of like going to a buffet. Thank God you got a variety. You don't have just all roast beef. So, you know, prop humor, it's served Carrot Top well. He's carved out one hell of a career for himself. So
he's
God bless him.
Been in Vegas for quite some time now. So interesting stuff, man. Hey, I got something I saw that was interesting. Remember Chris Tucker?
Yeah.
He was
never liked him. I just he seemed to all of his humor seemed to be based on a stupid voice that he does. Like a baby voice.
A lot of people would say that. However, at one point he was one of the highest paid actors in the movie industry. And there's an article that just came out. Ice Cube says Chris Tucker turned down $10 to $12 million for a Friday sequel due to his religious beliefs. He's saying that he offered him this position, and they were ready to pay him this huge amount of money, but he turned it down for religious reasons. It says he didn't want to cuss or smoke weed on camera anymore. Wow. He says, you know, he's still a stand-up comedian, and he doesn't go down that road anymore. One of the comments that's in here is it makes it harder for him to do comedy as a result of that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, people have a certain expectation of him. He's got a fan base, and all of a sudden he turned his back on his fan base.
Yeah, and but you know, hats off to him for standing up for his values on that whole thing. Yeah, I do too. But you know, we talked earlier about these politicians and having a moral high ground and just not participating in things that are legal, but still don't have a moral foundation to them. But it seems like none of them can resist that. Right. But here, this guy, boy, he's Hollywood is a very great elixir place. Yeah, exactly. And there's few people that can resist this whole thing, but this guy seems to be one of them.
That's the downside of being in a capitalist society, is that we worship the almighty dollar above all else, and that's why people are so corruptible.
You know, that reminds me of a movie that I just watched recently, Citizen Kane. Have you? I hadn't seen that movie since I was in high school. I was forced to watch it in one of my classes.
Is that Yul Brynner?
No, it's I'll think of his name in a second here. It's Orson Welles, and now. I really had no interest in this movie, but Rex Lee kept telling me, dude, this is about what's happening today with the press and censorship and all of these types and speaking truth to power. And he really got me thinking about this, and also the cinematic expertise that Orson Welles used. So I watched the movie over the weekend, and it was really quite a movie. I highly recommend it to take a look at it. There's so many aspects to the movie, but here this man, George Foster Kane, is given this huge sum of money. I mean, he grows up with a silver spoon, and he decides to run this paper against the will of the people that are actually in charge of his inheritance. And he has these ambitions to just be able to speak the truth and get the truth out there. But what ends up happening is absolute power corrupts absolutely. And as he becomes bigger and bigger, he captures all these news syndicates all across the country, and he becomes at first his ambition is to get the truth out there, but it evolves into I'll tell people what to think. And as a result, he makes this amazing amount of money. But he buys this property that's called Xanadu. He calls it Xanadu. And there's so many shades of Donald Trump in here, of the Murdoch family, all of these different families that own these different news syndicates across the country right now. The things that are happening in politics, and the censorship that's going on, all this stuff is inside it, and it's really well done. Bottom line, though, that I got out of it was this: is in the end, the man dies alone and miserable, and he even though he's got the whole world. But yet the one thing that's the most valuable thing is love, and the ability to not receive love, but to be able to give that self-sacrificing kind of love. And he didn't have that capacity, and dies miserable and alone. And when I thought about all the things that he had gained, I thought, I wouldn't trade places with that guy in a minute. I would never do. I mean, it puts the world, that movie puts everything into perspective for me.
I may have said it on our show before. I'm not sure, but I've always thought I could never in a million years trade places with Donald Trump.
Me neither. I would not want that.
Living in a penthouse in New York all the time. I mean, he's never outside except for a golf course now and then. And I don't know, just going meeting to meeting and limo to limo, and that sterile life that it seems void of true love. I mean, Melania, she seems like a class act, yet how can she stay with him? Is known adultery, and physically he's gross. I mean, and as a person, he's gross. I mean, I just think though I could never in a million. I don't care how much money and power he has. I can never. I would hate to live his life for a week. I really would.
You look at all of these guys. I mean, look at Joe Biden. I wouldn't want to trade places with him. I wouldn't want to. Who would I?
He's never really worked a day in his life. Not really. His life's been a cakewalk. I mean,
yeah, but he's supposedly the most powerful man in the world right now as the president of the United States.
But he's not. I think the deep state is.
To my point. The world gives accolades to things. That's the thing, is the Citizen Kane thing. The world would say that guy was a great success, but the world is backwards. That guy was not a great success. He may have had all the things the world loves, but in the end, the thing that he really wanted eluded him his entire life. And what I see here is these people that we build up and say, oh, that guy, he's the people in Hollywood. I see it all the time here. We idolize these people, but would you really trade places with them?
Most people would say in a minute, yes.
No.
But there's such a the narcissists win today. Social media, reality TV, politics, everything. If you're a narcissist, you have a 90% better chance, probably more than that, of rising to the top, because you got to want somebody that'll do anything to get their face in front of a camera.
And that's what you're saying is so true. And yet that's all me. And that's what Citizen Kane is about too. Oh. In fact, what I realized that I learned was, at the time the movie was done in 1941, much of it was about William Randolph Hearst, who was a big news guy out here in California that ran all the papers across the United States. And word got out that Orson Welles was putting this movie together, and Hearst tried to stop that. Hearst has this Hearst Castle out here. I think you might have driven by it when you were here in California before, but it's like, it's got everything. Many movies were filmed there and everything. It was very much like the Xanadu in Citizen Kane. And Hearst tried to stop Welles from putting this movie out because he was telling the truth to power. But Welles stubbornly said, no, I want to put this out there. I am going to put this out there. And he used all the actors that he used were no names at the time. Some of them did become famous as a result, but he put that movie out there. It made a huge mark, and Hearst ends up ruining Welles' future going forward and crushes him. And Welles, the person that he could have been, never actually materialized, and that was the end of Welles. Very interesting thing that happened right there, but so many allusions to the things that are happening here today and now. It just goes to prove that history repeats itself over and over again. That's why it's so important to learn it.
That's what it's not supposed to do. We're supposed to learn the lessons of history. And
that's why I'm saying it's so important that we study these things, but people don't. If you asked 9 out of 10 people would probably say the most boring class that they had in high school was history.
True, but it all depends on your teacher.
Absolutely.
I remember, I thought the same thing until I got to college. And I don't know if I was a sophomore or a junior, but I took a history class, world history. And the guy came in, you probably know the story. I've said it several times. The guy comes in and he's got his bow tie and his wingtip shoes and everything. And he goes, make no mistake, this is Revenge of the Nerds. And he went on to say that, look, this is going to be a hard class. You're going to have to not memorize certain things. You're going to have to live and breathe it. You're going to have to talk about this with your friends, or at least your dog when you take them for a walk. Because if you want, and he made it so interesting. I loved that class, and I never liked a history class before.
You know, I was so fortunate in high school that I had 2 great history teachers, one right after the other. And it wasn't a bunch of boring dates that we had to remember.
Right.
These 2 teachers told a story every time I came in. History is his story. It's God's story of what's happening. It's his story. And so it's all about the way that you tell the story. It's so exciting what's happened in the past, but I'd say probably the same 9 out of 10 people that would say it was their most boring class. 9 out of 10 history teachers don't know how to tell a story. And that's where the problem actually lies. I think
with
it's
any
a shame.
teaching, though, you got to have a passion for what you're teaching.
I taught what was
Photoshop.
Your worst class? What was the class in high school that you thought was the most boring?
I'll get back to that. I just wanted to say that I taught Photoshop in college for 18 years, and I loved it. I was very good at it. I got reviewed.
That has a lot to do with their success.
That's the point. I got reviewed twice a semester by the students in what do you want to say, impersonal, private reviews. And that was the consistent thing, is this guy just really loves what he teaches. And he's really good as a result.
So and you're bringing passion to it. And the passion rubs off. That's how these Mrs. Albee and Mr. Yanko, they brought passion to what they were doing. And you think about high school, they taught the same class, what 3, 4, 5 times a day. They had to say the same thing. And so by the time you get there, and they've said it 4 times, think that could be boring. But both of them, they brought the passion every single time.
That's amazing. And what did you ask?
Thank God for those 2. What was the most boring class? Boring class for you in high school?
That's a good question. I did have some good teachers, I have to say. So
I
what
did
would
too.
otherwise be very boring, they actually are pretty good. I had a government class that I thought was boring, but the teacher was really good. So it wasn't as boring as I would have thought. Man, I'm really blowing up with messages. I'm going to have to get going here.
So you didn't have any boring classes. That's it's a
Well,
lot for your
history
school.
in high school,
Yeah,
like I said,
history
I
in high
thought
school was
history
the
was
boring one.
boring, but it was
Yeah.
not until I got to college I had that terrific teacher that made it
It's great
really
that there was a
interesting.
turnaround. Yeah,
It's all about the teaching.
yeah, I agree.
Always.
Math was mine. Man.
Oh, well, wait a minute. No, I got to back way the hell up for sure as any kind of math, especially algebra. No,
geometry was
by
terrible
far,
for me.
I never even took it. No, by far and away, any kind of math, any kind of math.
Oh, so boring. And what story can you tell? Like we were talking about telling the story and having passion. Boy, how can you have? I'm sure there's some good ones out there, but God bless those guys. I wish I would have had those guys because man, I had the most boring teachers, the most boring class. It's giving me a stomach ache just thinking about it.
my freshman year of college, I took fundamentals of math, part of those prerequisites.
Yes,
I failed it. I stopped going. That's where I was when I was a freshman. It was like, I hate that. And I just stopped going.
Too.
And I dealt with it later. And then I found out back then, can't do it anymore, but back then I could take 5 philosophies to dodge all math courses. So that's what I did. Principles of argument, base intro to philosophy, 7 ideas that shook the universe.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
That was really
I like
cool.
that one. Yeah, that was a great
travel,
one.
All kinds of crap.
Oh, that was a fun one.
Did I say principles of argument? But that was one. Yeah. But anyways, that's how I dodged all math courses. You can't do that anymore. But
this is why I did not become an astronaut. No, I didn't know I was going to be 6'4". So, but I remember telling my dad that I was going to be an astronaut. He says, "Well, you better be doggone good at math." And I was like,
wow.
Yeah. Maybe I could be a salesperson. or
the rest of our roommates in Animal House that all went into criminal justice because that was the easiest major.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hey, well, why don't we go ahead and wrap it up, man?
Yeah. Great talking to you as always.
You too, Barry.
Hope you have a good, productive week, dude. I know you got a lot
on
your plate. If you need to talk, I'll be around.
Right on, brother. Love you, man.
Love you too. All right.
Bye.